So this is probably for all of you, like the first storyteller session. We're 2 minutes into it, so we'll probably slowly launch into the session. My name is Sebastian. I'm the facilitator, and it's an honor and a pleasure to host the session of Jesse and Douglas, who will be our storytellers joining from Australia, which is like they're still up late at night to share their story with us. As all the sessions, we will also record this one. So in case you don't want to be recorded, please just turn off your camera and mute yourself. We will have the opportunity to collect your questions via Mentimeter. So please, I'll just post the link in the chat and you can drop your questions at any point in time. Like with 20 people, we're kind of a little bit borderline. Maybe we can also kind of launch more into a dialogue and discussion anyways then. But if you have some questions you want to ask, just drop them in there and I'll try to structure them a little bit and then facilitate a Q&A session. But now I think let's hand over to Jesse and Douglas to share their story for roughly 20-30 minutes. And then I'm very much looking forward to exchanging with all of you on what you take from the discussions, what questions you might have. Over to you guys.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We're very excited to be here. It's a quite amazing experience for us to actually talk about our story and for people to be interested in it. So I think, Jess, you've got a couple of slides you want to put up about who we are first.
I'm going to get us started. So I'll just pull this screen up. Bear with me. So we are excited to be here with you all and a little bit nervous. I've clicked the wrong link already. Here we go. So this will be about our journey within the Australian construction industry. We design and install large-scale commercial irrigation systems, which is basically watering gardens and lawns. We have a small company. There are 10 of us in total, and we've got a field team of 6 guys who love working with their hands and just getting the job done. They're not the kind of people who really enjoy sitting down and talking about the organisation and emotions. So we've had a bit of a journey. They're mostly young men, and we have a very small team of 3 people in the office for quoting and administration. We'd like to tell you a bit about the context that we work in. In Australia, 86.6% of the workforce are male. 20% of the workers are shown to have had a mental health condition. And men in the construction industry are 53% more likely to commit suicide than other men across the country. It's a very harsh environment, very toxic male domination culture. We lose 1 construction worker every 2 days to suicide. And apprentices in construction are 2.5 times more likely to die by suicide than other young men their age. So within this context, we have hit some pain points working in the construction industry, working within this field that is just so difficult, so harsh. We've been running from the year 2000, and between 2000 and 2019, 58 people started with us and left, which is an enormous number for a very small company. It's an average of 3 people per year. In those 19 years, only 5 people stayed with us for longer than 3 years. Our retention rate was awful. We just had so much fast turnover, we just couldn't get people to stay. And in 2019, right before we started our Teal journey, we had an all-time low with 7 people starting and leaving in the same year. We would also frequently hit dry patches with little work ahead of us. There's a bit of scarcity and flow in and out of the work that's available to us. So since beginning our Teal journey late in 2019, our field team has been here for 5 years on average. We've had 5 team members start and leave in that time, which is an average of just over 1 per year compared to 3 per year. And also the context of that happening has been so different for us. It hasn't been this this process where people will just up and leave. There's been conversations and connection in a lot of those instances, and moving together towards them moving out of the company. And for the past 2 years, we have had work ahead of us, projected 6 months ahead to work that goes a year ahead, which has been amazing. So for more of the Aquatex story and context around stories within our team, you can check out the Better Work podcast, Better Work Australia. We tell our story there with some detailed examples. And I'll stop the share there and hand back over to Dad to get more of our story started.
Yeah, so like I said, I've been running since 2000. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I hit a point of despair and high stress level, high despair, and just really despairing at the staff turnover and how stressful the industry was and how difficult it was to make it all happen, difficulty in finding work. And I was really at a point of, do I quit? And as I was looking around at what I could do, there wasn't much else that inspired me. And it was about that time I came across who's now a friend of ours, Dean, and he introduced me to this, the book Reinventing Organizations, and sat down and read it, and it absolutely blew my mind. And it was the first time I'd ever come across an alternative view to the way we run businesses in Australia, an alternative view to, the hierarchy, the dominance culture, and it just struck a chord with me of there's possibly a different way to go. And it flicked a light on for me, and I think from that point I just stepped into, this is the way we're going to go. And in my usual manner of launching into everything at full speed, I stepped into changing the organisation and instituting Teal. We were going to become a Teal organisation, and basically started, I think, an internal war of blowing the organisation up. And I was so embedded, I think, in Orange culture, and so entrenched in that particular mindset, that as I was grappling with the concepts of Teal, I just launched into it in a very Orange way, and created this dynamic of stress in the organisation, which was just unbelievable. Jess, I might flick over to you for a moment.
It was an interesting start of, we both read the book and we were so inspired by it, and there had been so much stress. I remember people leaving, and the dialogue around that of, like, how could they just leave, and we pay them so well, and there's all these ideas about how we were as a company, and then realizing, oh my gosh, there's so much more to a healthy organization, and the push of, well, let's do this and let's change this. And I'm remembering early meetings. We'd never have staff meetings. I mean, we have a team of tradesmen. They get out, they get the work done, they go home. So we started having team breakfasts at 6 a.m. and everybody would come in bleary-eyed, get their coffee, and then just sit in silence. And Dad would start the conversation and talk like for 40 minutes, and everyone would just sit there, and then he'd ask a question and everyone would just sit there. It was just agony. Just remembering those slow early days of what does it even look like to make a change in this context.
And for me, the frustration was just developing. I was coming from already a very stressful, frustrated environment, and suddenly there was this opportunity to change. And my take on it was, let's just all read the book. Let's just get with the program, learn how to do this Teal thing, do Teal together, and we'll all succeed. and then foisted on my staff, who were a bunch of tradies, great with their hands, great technicians. Some of them had, retrospectively, I found out, had not read a book since primary school. Reading was not their forte, and dumping this upon them just created this enormously stressful environment. And really, it was 6 or 8 months of just trying to institute different things, having team meetings, bringing in dialogue, opening up transparency, and all the while my frustration was building, and the frustration of my staff was building. Suddenly, they were thrown into this direction, which was completely opposite to the way they'd learnt for the last 10, 15 years. And my level of confusion was building, my level of despair was building, and it really got to a point where it really broke open. I think there was a point, Jess, where you and I went for a walk out of the office and around the block, and I remember we were just walking and walking, and I was just letting loose on why won't the staff get with the program, and there's this great opportunity and no one's picking it up, and there's such resistance and such stuckness in the organisation. I'm not quite sure what your perspective is, Jess.
Yeah, I remember there was a bit of a transition for me through that time. In the beginning, it was your project. Dad's really passionate about this. I'm in the office doing the accounts, running the finances, and kind of just following along. And I remember just before that time, I think I had started to really hold it for myself and care about this myself, and really started to see your effect on the organization. And I remember walking around the block and really being able to see pretty clearly how you were contributing to the situation that you were frustrated about, and trying to help you see, not very successfully at all, hey, don't you think this, or what about that? And just the story you were holding was so strong. If they would just change, if they would just pick this up, I'm trying so hard, why won't anything shift? And yeah, I remember, that's one really clear moment, but we kind of went in a loop of like the passion for this would kind of come back in, and we'd work harder and we'd try new things, and then we'd hit a frustration point. And it'd be that again. It'd be like, why is nobody picking this up? Why is nothing changing? What are we going to do? And I'm just kind of sitting and observing a lot through this time, and also reacting. Like, we have a close relationship with father-daughter working together, and I would find myself kind of pulled into Dad's orbit, like pulled into the emotional kind of reactivity. Not always like agreeing with him, but also not able to kind of step back and say, well, actually this or that. Yeah, and I'll hand back over to you there, Dad.
Yeah. So I remember during that phase, Jessie would often turn to me and say, Dad, you're so orange, which is just not helpful. Identifying where I'm coming from, and me just having no idea how to transition across. And I think at that stage we put up on the office wall was it the Zen Master and Ahab? I don't know whether you have that slide there, Jess.
I'll just share that. We had this little diagram where let's get this up. We got a contrasting picture. We'd have the two versions of Dad. How's Dad showing up in the organization today? We've got, your peaceful, long-haired, at one with nature. Here's where we're moving in this one direction. Then we've got Captain Ahab, who is managing the storm, and he is going to harpoon that whale, and we are on direction and we are moving forward. And so we'd have these
you can see down the bottom the little scale. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know that we actually used that very much, but I put this up right to the right of Dad's desk so that he could see it as he came in the morning, just as a little like, hey, how are you showing up today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a visual reminder for me, and it came to a point, I guess, where there was a crisis and this dawning realization, and I had Dean assisting me, I had Jess assisting me, and I remember Dean making a comment that wherever the CEO goes, that's where the company goes. And this horrendous dawning realization that the problem wasn't my company and the problem wasn't my staff. I was the problem in my organization, and that I had to start addressing my internal dialogue, my internal worldview, the way I showed up every day, the way I communicated. And I was really starting to get I guess, a clear picture of the disparity between what I was saying and what I was presenting to the staff and where we were going as an organization and who I was actually being. That I was actually talking teal and talking collaboration and talking openness and transparency, and I was this stressed out, bloody minded, willful, directive, hierarchical individual. And there was a point there where I really had to start unpacking myself and how I presented to the world and let everyone else be. And I think there was months and months where the business just carried on, the staff just carried on with a sigh of relief. And I started unpacking, what it actually means to be a teal individual and what it means to start letting go of some of the stuff that I'd learnt over the last, 35 years of doing business. And it really was a struggle to come to grips with it. And I think there was a pivotal point, one of the meetings we had, Jess, where Jack started to speak up. We had a meeting and we'd transitioned into afternoon meetings, and we're getting together talking about business. And instead of fronting up being the leader and the CEO and directing us where we should go, I was just in such a broken state, I guess. I fronted up to the meeting and actually just shared exactly where I was at, that I was confused and that I couldn't see where we were going, and I was having trouble piecing this all together, and then just stopped talking and just let others start to express where they were at. So, Jess, you recall that meeting?
Yeah, I do. And I remember around that time that noticing that shift in how you would show up, like, to that meeting and to meetings in general. I mean, in that meeting, there was just this lean in from the team, and people who would never give their opinion and never speak up had something to say, and there was this connectivity, and that moved forward. I think I remember saying to you something maybe slightly before then or afterwards, I don't know, but did you know that when you talk less, everybody else talks more and leans in a little bit more? And we had this transition from you as the most powerful person in the company having the loudest, longest voice to actually stepping back, and other people's voices started to come through. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was absolute eye opener, and it was I think a sobering lesson for me. I'm in my 50s now, and you think you've got a handle on how business should run, and then suddenly you're unpacking, I guess, your whole paradigm of how it should operate. And it really ushered in an enormous amount of change in a very short period of time when we look back on where we've come from. There's dynamics going on which I have only dreamed of, in years past, that has come about, I think, by me actually letting go and just starting to deal with my own issues and my own approach to how I run business. So yeah, I'm a completely different space than I was even 12, 18 months ago, where there's, you know, the stress levels have dropped enormously. The buy-in from staff is just extraordinary. We have, you know, we have a very young team. You know, most of our guys are in their 20s and releasing to the point where they're running, you know, major projects, where they're making decisions in the field, where instead of me being the you know, the sole director of what should happen and leading the charge, I've become a more and more in the background, a resource where they can lean on and get my experience and my knowledge. And they're actually not even released to. It's actually they're fully empowered to make decisions and make judgment calls. The whole company's transitioned into, you know, even down to employing staff. I don't employ staff anymore. The guys are out in the field, employ staff. They buy whatever equipment they need.
The feel in the team
Yeah,
is completely different. We get the team together now, and right from the beginning, everybody's chatting, everybody's having a laugh. And then you sit down and you get the conversation started and everybody's contributing. It's such a huge difference to those early meetings when we started out.
And you know, those who are the strongest detractors are the ones who are speaking up and actually most insightful. And you know, I'm finding, you know, that guys are actually bringing their personal life to work now. They actually are divulging, you know, how their lives are going, what's happening at home. You know, they're not only willing to share, but they're wanting to connect into, you know, to how their life is, and reciprocated with me. You know, I've got aging parents, and my care for them is increasing, and having to step in and out of the organisation, and just having a bunch of people around me who are actually connected with where I'm at personally, and willing to, well, not even willing, just part of their makeup is that they will carry the load. You know, if there's a shortfall anywhere, there's a willingness to step in rather than me being the one who has to solve, you know, all the issues of the organisation. So it's an extraordinary shift for both of us. It's for me, it's revolutionary. It really is.
Yeah, I think that's the end of our story, Sebastian. So we could switch over to questions now.
Thanks a lot for sharing. And yeah, I think, Douglas, you picked a lot up on like this need to unpack yourself after so many years kind of in the industry. You thought you figured it out. And can you share a little bit like what that really meant for you personally? Like can you dive a little bit more into depth what your personal journey in that was? Some, I don't know, paradigm shifts you had to make, some struggle points that you really wrestled with on your personal journey there?
Yeah, it's I think being in business, I've been in business now for 30 years, 35 years, and I think a lot of my ego was attached to the business. You know, I'm a successful businessman. Family's grown up. You know, have all the trimmings of success, and I know what I'm doing. You know, I've been in the industry a long time, and you know, we're a very small company, but we have a lot of technical expertise. So a lot of ego attached to how we go about it, and yet and still completely aware that not only is my organisation in dire straits, that the whole industry is really in a shocking place. That the amount of abuse that goes on, the amount of systemic, destruction of men's lives, basically, of abuse of younger guys coming in, really was tearing at me, and that something had to change. And as we unfolded into the process, I guess the horrendous realization for me was that because I'd engaged into this system, feeling that that's the way business was done, that I was actually contributing to it. that I was actually part of the problem. So for me, it was a massive ego hit of, here am I presenting as this successful businessman, but I'm the cause of the problem. Like in the small world that I'm existing in, I'm the one who actually is exacerbating the problem. So for me, there was a real check within myself of really just to stop doing what I was doing, like to stop the damage, to stop the abuse. During that period, a close friend of mine in the industry, his son actually committed suicide, and it was absolutely identified that the stress he was under in the workplace was a contributor to it, and it really hit home to me of what am I doing to these young guys? What am I doing to the people around me? And so there was a period of time of really just going back to basics of literally how am I getting up in the morning? What am I thinking? How am I presenting? And really leaned on Dean and leaned on Jess to be at arm's length, to give me a reflection back of, when I speak a particular way, it's dominating, it's demanding, it's manipulating, it's controlling, and actually identifying for me that you're behaving badly. Early on in the piece, and you'll have to excuse the language, but we're dealing with tradies here, that we actually instituted a policy in our work agreement, and it was called the no arseholes policy. And it was in tradie vernacular of the not allowing bullying to happen, identifying bullying, identifying arsehole behavior, calling it out in your teammates, calling it out, in the industry, that not allowing it to happen. The horrifying thing for me was that on paper, it was open up to me. I'm the CEO. I'm part of the organisation. That applies to me as well. When a 22-year-old pulls you up and says, Doug, how you're talking to me, you're being an asshole, it really hits home of, wow, this is really bad. This is my personal presentation to the world, and it's really bad. So, yeah, quite threatening. I'll just pause there for a moment.
Yeah. And you're talking about that threatening, right? Like that, how much it also affects you personally. You talked about your ego and everything. And I find it quite impressive when you talked about like that frustration at the beginning, when you kind of started to change things, but it wasn't really picked up by people, and it was frustrating, and you were more in despair, as you said, about not making the progress or not having the impact that you had hoped for, which is probably typical in a lot of change journeys. Can you maybe explain a little bit more how you dealt with that, how you kept your confidence, your optimism despite the challenges that you encountered in the early phase?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I'm naturally motivated and enthusiastic, and I love what I do. I love building projects. I love working with guys and thinking things through. And I viewed this change as another project. We'll just do this and we'll get mastery over it, and we'll become good at it, and we'll be Teal. I think the transition for me was a personal one. I think the big shift is when I actually let go of control of the company and actually let my staff be, and actually let them have their own opinions. And most of them were quite negative to what I was trying to do. There was resistance, there was pushback. So I moved from directing the company to a particular place, and actually just moving myself to that place of being transparent, being completely honest where I was at, allowing space. The phrase I use at the moment, I guess, is holding space. So I moved to holding space for people to express what they want to express, to actually, even bring forward negative, opinions of where the company was at, to start to articulate where they were stressed, what they didn't like. And it started to set a stage for me, or for us, to actually move into different places. Getting back to You know, wherever the CEO goes, that's where the organization goes. This
Can I,
realization that it's not. Sorry, go.
I want to jump in there because Nora pointed out that phrase as well. The company's going where the CEO is going, which has been what we've been saying. We actually had a moment this morning where we realized more deeply to that, as the CEO is, the company is. Where the CEO is going is where the company goes can be a little bit misleading, because that was kind of the philosophy we started out with. I am going here and the company will go here. And there was all of this resistance. As it shifted to as I am in you, so the company is, and you started shifting. And I just want to name that, because exactly what you were naming, as you started holding space, as you started opening up, the company started to do that too, rather than it being a directional, we are going here.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's really good. And the disparity between what I was saying, we're going this direction, and what I was actually being inside started out as two different things. Now there's a real caution in me of, am I actually living what I'm saying? Am I holding the space that I want everyone to move into? Am I actually behaving in a way that can be reciprocated? Well, you know, the reality is, however I behave will be reciprocated, and all I have to do is look at the reflection of the people around me, and that's what I'm presenting. So it's it's caused me great pause. It slowed me right down. You know, creating space for people to actually have dissent, have an opinion, have a different direction. You know, bring forward proposals which are way out of my paradigm of understanding, and hold sufficient space and respect for them to actually bring forth the whole idea, their whole thought process. It's a challenging thing.
And I love how you say that it's not about like pushing your agenda, but more holding that space and allowing things to emerge and grow. Super fascinating. We're at a bit of a mix-up in the Mentimeter. So we're actually having two rooms reporting on the same Mentimeter. And maybe actually we're a quite small group, so I actually want to use that opportunity. If there's one question that you're still passionate about, maybe just ask them directly in this group, or put them in the chat quickly, and we make sure that we address your most burning question. So feel free to unmute yourself and just let's see if there's anything that, Brandon.
Hi, Douglas and Jesse. My name's Brendan O'Keefe. I'm from London. I'm a former CEO that went through a transition similar to yourselves, and I'm now in a position of training leaders to go through that transition. And I found your talk so wonderful and so open and so refreshingly honest. And so thank you so much for that. And I'm learning something retrospectively, particularly from you, Douglas, what you said about going into an audience of people and saying, I'm really struggling with this stuff. And I wish I'd done that myself when I was leading a transition. I think I would have found it so much easier to get things over the line. I always felt it was my job to be really up. But look, we're going self-managed and be bouncy and energetic. But actually inside, sometimes I was feeling, what is this crap? I'm not sure I get it myself. You know, I think if I'd been more honest and about my own perspective and feelings, I might have got it done quicker and better. So I really thank you for your openness and your honesty today. It's been incredibly refreshing.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for naming that. We were just talking today, just quickly, about exactly that when there's a disparity between what you're feeling, especially as the CEO of the company, and what you show up with, everybody feels that. Everybody, like, there's a discomfort, and then when there's true honesty, it's like everyone relaxes and something opens up.
And there was one question in the Mentimeter. Oh, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that we're trained from the get-go to present a false image. You know, we're trained to present, you know, we're strong and forthright and got it all together and know the answers. And everyone knows it's not real. It's just not the truth. You know, and you know, even today, like I had an email back and forth with some clients who were wanting, you know, particular drawings in particular formats. And I just flicked into the email like, I've got no idea what you're talking about. I'm struggling with what you're talking about. And the response back was this amusement of the guy who was actually sending me the email was saying, I've got no idea either. I'm just trying to find someone who can understand what I'm talking about. And it's like this connecting with actually the humanity of each other rather than this image that we're presenting of how we should be. And I think that's like we've taught ourselves with this system to be false and then try and sustain this false thing, which just destroys us inside and destroys connection, destroys relationship. And then we wonder why, you know, we're depressed. We wonder why we're suicidal. We wonder why, you know, we can't communicate properly. It's horrendous. I'll just pause there.
There was one question actually in the Mentimeter around like the level of vulnerability that you showed in that kind of industry. And maybe it's actually an interesting thought, right? Like you talked about kind of what kind of people you hired, what your staff was. How was that really picked up when you changed course and how you showed up? You talked a little bit about that frustration, but maybe expand a little bit more on the specific dynamic and, I don't know, maybe surprising elements you encountered with dealing with this specific target group.
Yeah.
I'd love to speak to this, Dad.
Yeah, please do.
I remember actually an example from really recently is the two of us went through something difficult in the family, and we shared that with the guys, and one of them came in and said, oh, you know, your dad just updated me on what's happening, and I just wanted to say what I said to him, that if you need anyone to talk to, I'm here. And it, you know, it's things like that, and it's things like yeah.
Sorry, and just to qualify, this is a 22-year-old tradesman talking to Jess,
yes.
and a 56-year-old CEO. So yeah.
Yeah, so there's I mean, that's support rather than vulnerability. And it comes and it goes. They are a bunch of young blokes. They're a bunch of young tradies. So there is the persona, and there is the I'm a man and I'm, you know, showing up with this. And then there's a softness, and we see the undercurrent of that vulnerability kind of come and go. And yeah. I'm interested to hear you, Dad, what your response is.
Yeah, I think it's for me. It's like there were so many layers of separation between us. You know, like I was the boss. I'm an older guy. I'm, you know, skilled in business. I know everything. You know, do as I tell you. And so there was all these layers of separation, and over the years we've dispensed with those to the point where, you know, we've a long way to go, and we're a small company, but there's this appreciation of just, you know, we're a bunch of people who come together every day, and we're living our lives, and we're actually sharing our lives together, and it makes no difference really whether I'm the CEO, you know, and we've got a new labourer. It's like there's value in the individual, and it was purposeful to start with, but now it's becoming this unstated culture that we inquire of each other. We let each other into our lives. We, you know, there's the joy of actually existing together. It runs right through the fact that we've got a job to do and we build stuff, you know, and I think like it starts to show itself in so many ways. Like we've ceased to measure productivity from just numbers and just binary, are we meeting budgets? The measure of how well we're doing is so broad, you know, it encompasses the health of the individuals, it encompasses, are we having sufficient rest? You know, are we having days off? You know, how are our spouses going? Like, you know, for years I had no idea really of how the families of the people who are in my organisation operated, and now there's just this flow back and forward of, you know, what families are up to, you know, new babies arriving, you know, guys breaking their arms. We got one guy who's in a heavy metal band, managed to stage dive off the stage and break his arm in the process. And that's just the joy of being part of it. And even this young guy started out as a labourer, digging holes, shown a desire to design, and now he's actually running our CAD design programs. And because he's broken his arm, I've got him full time now, which is extraordinary, you know. And so just the openness of guys bringing thoughts and ideas and what they'd like to see and how they'd like to be is extraordinary.
Yeah. You talked about kind of the level of autonomy you gave to your people, and one of the things you mentioned was the hiring and making also hiring decisions. There was one question from the audience around, like, how do you ensure that people are on the same page with how to go about like any process or protocols? Because it's, I assume, still also in your business, one of the key decisions you make as a company, who to bring on board or not. So how does that part of self-organization actually work for you?
I'll take this one.
Yeah.
The development of that has been pretty organic. It started with me realizing, like, it makes no sense for me and Dad to be hiring new field team staff. We're not working with them. They're out on the ground with the guys. And so it started with just a conversation of, hey, I think at least one or two of you guys should be in the interviews. Who wants to come? And then it moved to, hey, can we get more of the team in here, to the point that we'd actually have nearly the whole team, like 6 people in an interview. And the interview became more of a chat, and we changed the format. And then that shifted again to, kind of doesn't really make sense to bring someone who's going to be working with their hands out in the dirt with the team into an office to ask them a bunch of questions where everyone feels a bit uncomfortable. And so now what we do is we have a little bit of a online screening process where I send them a few questions. They send in answers. I send that through the team on Slack. The team says yes or no. We want to do a trial with them and see how they go. And then I say to them, hey, would you be willing to come in for 1 or 2 days? We'll pay you. You get to work with the team, see what the work is like. They get to see how you fit. And so we've done away with interviews completely. And the team makes the decision, because they're the ones who are going to be working with them. And it's gotten to the point now that we just hire people without involving Dad at all. Dad was on holidays a little while ago and came back and I said, I've hired 2 people, by the way.
Yeah, which is fabulous. And then, yeah, the buy-in from both the new employee and the guys who have actually signed them up is extraordinary. You know, there's a vested interest to make it work.
I mean, one piece that probably all business owners, CEOs, people who run companies would ask, like, what's really the impact on your actual business, right? Like, you talked about how you struggled at one point, like having that massive turnover. Can you share a little bit, like, how have you been doing, like, really from a also financial standpoint? How is your business developing since you embarked on that journey?
Let me go back to it. We've just gone through a process where we're opening up the transparency of the financials to the staff, and the dialogue has come from really us and them. Like, I had all the information, or Jess and I had all the information, and people were meted out information as we saw fit. That's all gone, and it's not fully opened up. We've got a process to go, but it's opening right up. I can't remember what it was, mid last year, Jess really felt strongly that the cost of living was going up, and that it was unreasonable for us just to expect of all the staff to, you know, keep their wages at the same level, and the cost of living was going up. So we had a I think we called the building blocks, where people could bring proposals. Jess brought it to me first, to her credit, and it was like, well, let's give it a try. But Jess basically floated to the organisation that wages should follow the cost of living increase. So I think at that point it was a 6% increase, Jess. And the bottom line was a $70,000 impact to the profit on a fairly small organisation. So it was a fairly major decision. Put it to the staff. Of course, every individual is saying, "Great, this is fantastic, a 6% pay increase." And then we talked about, well, what's the impact on the company? What does the company need in its own right? And we landed on a place of what's safe to try. Let's try this for a period of time and see how it goes. And it was for me, able to express, I have a lot of trepidation with the idea of just dropping $70,000, off the bottom line, and let's see how it goes. But I expressed my perspective. Others expressed their perspective. We decided to give it a go. We have not missed a beat. Our turnover is consistent. Our profitability has stayed the same. The most and this is accommodating all cost of living expenses, all wage rises. The most extraordinary change that we've seen in the organisation is that up until probably a year ago now, there was always this scarcity of work. We're in a fairly aggressive industry. It's large scale construction, and the dollar is the bottom line of everyone's building, big projects to a budget. And we were always under pressure to cut our prices down and to meet the market. There was always someone out there who could be quite cheaper than us, and everything came down to the bottom line. We've moved to a point now where, because of the shift in the organisation, the quality of our build has just gone through the roof, and there's no input from my part on that. It's like our failure rate on components has dropped to zero. It used to be a 3-weekly occurrence that I get a phone call from a client saying, "This has failed, send you guys out to fix it." The phone has stopped ringing as there's just a buy-in from everyone of, let's just build excellent stuff. The result of that is that, up to 2 years ago, it was a month-by-month basis of hunting for the work. That was my job. I'd quote the jobs, chase the work. We're at a point now, we turn over $2.5 million a year, a small company. We've actually got on our books now $1 million worth of work ahead of us that not only have pre-orders, but the clients are so keen on working with us that they've actually paid for all the materials up front, and we actually have the cash in the bank for all the materials, and they're booking us in for, "We'd like you to start on this date, and here's all this money to make sure you're not going to go anywhere." It's just an extraordinary shift in an industry which is still cutthroat, but whatever's shifted in us has actually reflected into the industry as well. Jess, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I do. I want to add that one of the big things that shifted, again, was something that shifted with you. Maybe a year and a half ago, of we can't say no to work, because if we say no to somebody, we won't get the next job from them. And if we don't get the next job, our work will dry up. And we had a customer who never paid their bills on time. The guys hated working with their people. They were very difficult to work with. And the whole team basically just said, "We don't want to do work with this company anymore."
Sorry, the whole team said to me. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, said to you. And there was a difficult process of you sitting with that and the discomfort of, is it okay to say no? And I remember the anxiety and the build up to, oh, I'm going to do this and I don't want to, but the team has spoken. And and there's been a process since then of kind of looking at those assumptions. For starters, that story of scarcity, of if we say no, there will be nothing in our future, to shifting to, actually, we're going to really honor our capacity. We're really going to honor what's healthy for the team, what's healthy for the company. And since that started happening, there's been this shift and work ahead of us.
Sounds really amazing.
And the salient point is the start. So we have a process now where if I win a project, I haven't won a project. I've actually got to bring it to the staff and do a proposal. and they discuss the pros and cons, and they come to the decision of, we'd like to work with the client. We've got enough space to do the work. It looks like an interesting job. Yes, Doug, you can do the job, which is a monumental shift in my mind from basically just laying on the staff whatever job I chose would be good for us. That's, and similarly with clients, like just mentioned that the client that we said no to, it was such a difficult conversation for me to go to the client and honestly say, my staff don't like working with you, so I'm going to say no to working with you again unless you change. And both of us were shocked. It was a horrendous conversation.
That's hilarious, and really shows what's possible. I would have, like, towards the end, one more question really on the future, where you talked about like the journey you've been on, but you also kind of hinted a little bit at what's to come. So, I mean, when you look like 2-3 years ahead, what are some of the tough nuts you still feel you need to crack? Some of the things you want to put in place, or maybe also looking at the Teal principles, some elements of the Teal thinking principles that you feel like, we're not fully there yet. So if you dream like 2-3 years ahead, what would kind of our conversation look like if things went as you envisioned it?
Jess, after you.
We're really at the moment working on holding Aquadec as its own entity, and what does the entity itself need? What does Aquadec need? And being able to voice that and give that information to, not even give that information to the team, but know what that is so that the whole team can hold it. And what information does that look like? What discussions does that look like? That's one of the really big ones right now. We would love to have our own premises. We hire a shed for the materials and an office, and the team is separate in that way. And so I imagine having a property where when the guys come in to get their stuff, we all get to chat and there's kind of more cohesion and community. Those are two things that are really important right now. I find it hard to think much further into the future than that.
Douglas, for you?
For me, we're on the eve. We're on the eve of discussions of, I guess you call it self-determination, of talking to each individual about what it is they need in the next 12 to 18 months, starting to talk about setting their own pay scales and then their own pay rate, and really breaking open the hard structure of you must fit into this category, and opening up the dialogue of what is it that you as an individual desire, and then that the organization is the sum total of all of us, that it actually can move wherever we want to move, and that it's not mine and they're not my staff anymore. It's actually the sum total of us. And I've moved as from a place of, like, I still hold the position of CEO. However, I am one of, in an organization of talented, insightful people, and for me to actually bring forward the question, where do we want to go, is extraordinary. Because for 35 years, it's like every morning I get up, or have got up, and determined we have to go this way. I have determined we're going this way, and now it's like let's open up a dialogue, and even to the point of view of what do we want to do work-wise. We build commercial irrigation systems. We're really good at it, but there's a whole smorgasbord of things that we could do, which are actually hugely fulfilling, for the want of someone standing up and say, I think we should do this. It's like, well, what's safe to try? Let's have a go. What's it going to cost? What do you think the outcome is? Let's see where it takes us. So, yeah, that's where I'd like to go.
Yeah, wonderful. I think it's a nice closing word as well, to wrap that off. I was super inspired by your story, kind of really also breaking some of my mental barriers of with what target groups can you actually make that? What are the things that you that need to be in place to drive such a transformation? I was super impressed kind of with the time frame, right? You started just a few years ago, and then how rapidly you really kind of went through all those steps and created that impact with your staff. And yeah, it was a pleasure to have that exchange with you here. And we will also continue to have the opportunity to talk. So if anyone wants to have more of a dialogue, we have a spatial chat available. So if you want to meet there, still hang out with us in the spatial chat, you can just join us there or move to any other part of the conference. We'll still hang out there and be super happy to still see some of you in those discussions. And that, really enjoy the rest of the conference. I hope you still have very insightful, inspiring discussions, exchange, speakers, storytellers. And yeah, take care.
Yeah, wonderful.
And
Thank
thanks
you.
again to the both of you.